My girlfriend said, "Don't feel special, you're replaceable," so I let her drown in her debts. My name is Ricardo. I'm 28 years old, and I was in a 3-year relationship with my girlfriend Neftella, who is 24. It all started in the most common and simple way, working together at a Starbucks in the city. We both had similar schedules and practically the same amount of money, and were just making ends meet. Although I always felt I wanted something more for my life. I don't know if it was ambition, discontent, or simply being tired of the routine, but even back then, I had the idea that I didn't want to spend my life working for someone else. I met Neftali behind the counter as we prepared coffees and served hurried customers every morning. She was a reserved but very observant person. She didn't talk much with our CO workers, but when she did, her comments were direct and clear. I, on the other hand, always tried to be more sociable to get along with everyone. Even though inside I was already tired of the uniform, the smell of coffee ingrained in my clothes, and the feeling that my time was being wasted. Little by little, we started talking more during our shifts, sharing, breaks, and eventually going out after work. It was something natural, nothing forced. Over time we became a couple, and although neither of us earned much, we somehow found ways to have a good time. Sometimes it was a simple pizza, a walk through the city center, or going to the movies once a month. For me, the company was what mattered. However, something inside me remained restless. I had always wanted to have my own business, and I saw an opportunity in the coffee shop. I watched every day how people spent money on a drink without a second thought, how coffee was more than a product. It was a habit, a social space, an excuse to meet up, constantly ask myself why I couldn't be the one to offer that. But in my own way, after much thought and saving what little I could, I decided to quit. It was one of the most difficult decisions I've ever made, because even though I didn't like the job, it was a secure income. And at that moment, I had nothing else. Neftel. I was surprised at first. She even questioned me a lot. I remember her words perfectly. "Are you really going to leave a steady paycheck for an idea you don't even know will work?" I didn't have a completely convincing answer, but I was convinced that if I didn't try, I would regret it for the rest of my life. I took the plunge. I opened a small coffee shop in a rented space. In the beginning, it was very complicated paperwork, unexpected expenses, sleepless nights, wondering if there would be enough customers the next day. Slowly, with effort and perseverance, it started to work. I was behind the counter making coffees, waiting tables, and closing the place at night. It was exhausting, but different. Every hour of work was for myself, and every satisfied customer was a reminder that I hadn't made a mistake. Neftella supported me as much as she could, although she continued working at Starbucks. She was studying graphic design, and I saw a promising future in her. However, there was something that worried me. The cost of her degree was a weight she carried alone, and I knew she couldn't afford it. One day, after giving it a lot of thought, I offered to pay for her university. It wasn't a simple conversation. At first, she was very reluctant, almost offended. "No, Ricardo, I don't want you to think I'm with you for your money," she told me seriously. I tried to explain that it wasn't like that. It was important for me to see her grow, that her success mattered to me too, that if it was in my power to help her, I was going to do it. After several arguments and silences, she accepted, and a new stage in our relationship began. At first everything was strange. She didn't want me to cover her expenses, but little by little she got used to it. I paid her monthly tuition, the materials she needed, the design software, and even her transportation. When she was short on cash, I didn't see it as a sacrifice, but as an investment in us. Meanwhile, my coffee shop grew. After a couple of years, I managed to open a second branch, and sometime later a third. The business was doing well, much better than I had imagined. That time I quit Starbucks, afraid I wouldn't even have enough to pay rent. I didn't get rich overnight, but I did achieve a level of financial stability that allowed me to live peacefully, help my family with some things, and of course cover all of Netally's expenses. Over time, paying for everything became normal. She quit her job. She no longer saw the point in staying at Starbucks when I could cover everything. I never held it against her because I did it from the heart. Sometimes the thought would cross my mind whether it was right to get her used to this lifestyle, to me solving everything. But I always ended up convincing myself that love is shown through actions. And this was my way of showing it. I remained motivated. My driving force was to see her graduate, to see her practice her profession, and to feel that all that effort had been worth it. For me, working so many hours, taking risks with 3 coffee shops, and carrying the daily pressure of the business had a clear purpose for both of us to have a better future. However, When she finally finished her degree, I was in for a surprise I didn't see coming. I thought she would look for internships, build a portfolio, try to work at a design agency. She didn't. She finished university. But she never took a real step toward practicing what she had studied. I tried to motivate her, suggesting she send out resumes, create professional profiles. I even offered her a space in one of the coffee shops to design our advertising and get some practice, but she showed no interest. She always found excuses. It wasn't the right time. She needed to rest after so much effort. The salaries were low, or the competition was too tough. Gradually, I realized that her life hadn't changed much after graduating. On the contrary, what did change was her spending habits. She started buying more things than she ever would have thought of before. Designer clothes, expensive accessories, trips with friends, quaint outings to restaurants. Although I was still paying for most things, it now seemed like she was spending without any limit. At first I justified it. She deserves it. She studied hard. Let her enjoy herself a little. But over time, I noticed that a little had turned into a lifestyle. She bought almost everything she wanted and never worried about the cost because she knew I would cover it. I worked hard every day to keep the coffee shops running, dealing with suppliers, employees, and finances, while I watched her spend with an ease she never had before. The balance tipped even further. And although I tried not to give it too much importance, deep down, something bothered me. The first big expense that really made me question. Everything happened a few months after her graduation. One day out of the blue, she showed up driving a brand new car straight from the dealership. I was stunned, not because I don't like cars, but because she never consulted me. It turned out she had financed it with one of the credit cards I had given her for her expenses, which of course, I was the one paying off month after month. I remember the conversation clearly. "What is this, Neftella?" I asked with obvious annoyance, looking at the car parked in front of our apartment. "Honey, don't be mad. I needed it. Besides, you'll use it too. In the end, it's for both of us," she replied, smiling as if it were a shared gift. I couldn't believe it. Brand new car financed without telling me beforehand. It felt like a huge sign of disrespect. Still, I tried to calm down. I thought maybe I could handle it over time. The resentment lingered. Few weeks passed, although I was still upset, tried not to make it a daily battle. Then something happened that I could no longer ignore. One afternoon, I left the house in a hurry and realized I had forgotten my wallet. Since we were together, I asked Neftali for one of her cards to pay for a couple of quick things. She didn't have a problem with it, and gave it to me. When I went to use it, to my surprise, it was declined. That seemed strange to me, because according to her, she hadn't used it all month. I thought it might be a mistake, but I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling. When I got back to the apartment, I checked the bank statements and there it all was. Card was maxed out with charges for clothes, makeup, perfumes, accessories, and luxury stores. Hundreds of purchases she had never mentioned. I sat in silence for a few minutes trying to process what I was seeing. It wasn't possible that she had spent so much money in such a short time. And the worst part was that she did it behind my back. When I finally confronted her, the conversation spiraled out of control. "What is all this, Neftella? Do you really think this is normal?" I demanded, showing her the statement. She looked at me with annoyance and said something that still echoes in my head today. "You're being overly dramatic. A good man just pays and doesn't complain." I felt like I had been punched in the gut. I explained with rage everything it had cost me to build the coffee shops, the sleepless nights, the constant pressure of the business, and how she, instead of appreciating it, was just spending recklessly. But her response was even harsher. "Any man with pants on would pay without a fuss. Don't feel so special, Ricardo. You're replaceable. And you better take care of me, because there are a couple of guys at the gym who are eating me up with their eyes, and they're not ugly." That comment set me off completely. Not only was she disrespecting me, but she was also making it clear that she didn't value anything I did for her. I was silent for a few seconds. Then I looked her in the eyes and said calmly, though I was furious inside, "What? Honey, you're right." She smiled, as if she had won the argument. She had no idea what was about to happen. I walked to the closet, pulled out a suitcase and left it in the middle of the living room. "If I'm so replaceable, then take your things, and mind you, only your things, not what I paid for." She looked confused. She thought I was joking. I continued, speaking in a firm tone. "Wait. What is actually yours?" "Nothing. Because I've paid for everything you have. So do this. Take the new things you bought with that card and the car. You want it so badly and leave, Enjoy driving it, because I'm sure it will be repossessed soon. She let out a nervous laugh and said, "Come on, Ricardo. Stop joking." But I wasn't joking. I opened the door and asked her to leave. My decision was made. I wasn't going to continue letting someone belittle me after everything I had done for her. Neftel, I tried to argue. Tried to manipulate me with sweet words and even tears, but I felt nothing anymore. I had put up with too much, and that phrase that I was replaceable was the straw that broke the camel's back. I watched her leave with her things, with her makeshift suitcase, and a look of disbelief on her face. It hurt, it did, but I also felt a huge weight being lifted off my shoulders. That night, as I stayed alone in the apartment, I understood that I had been carrying someone who didn't want to grow, who had just gotten used to me solving everything. It wasn't easy, but from that moment on, I decided I would never again let someone make me feel that way. Update. It's been 3 weeks since I broke up with Neftali. Honestly thought the worst was behind me. I had convinced myself that the best thing to do was to focus on my business, my coffee shops, and my personal peace. Because after everything that happened, it made no sense to keep dragging along a relationship that only drained me emotionally and financially. However, I was wrong. The unexpected hit me hard, and in the most unforeseen way. That afternoon, I was at home resting after a particularly tough day at the coffee shops. I was just making myself a light dinner when I heard loud banging on the door. It wasn't normal knocking. It was hard, desperate bangs, as if someone wanted to break it down. I approached cautiously, thinking it might be an angry customer or some problem related to the business. But as soon as I opened it, I had no time to react. A direct punch landed on my face. The blow was so strong that I fell backward and tasted the metallic tang of blood in my mouth. When I managed to look up, I saw Derek, one of my supposed friends, with his fists clenched and his face full of fury. The first thing I thought was, what the hell is he doing here? I barely had time to get to my feet when he threw a second punch. This time I managed to dodge it, and responded with one straight to his jaw. The situation escalated in seconds. Before I knew it, we were grappling in the middle of my living room, hitting each other as if we were lifelong enemies. Between heavy breaths and poorly aimed punches, I managed to stop for a moment, and yelled, "What the hell is wrong with you? Derek, why are you coming to my house to attack me?" He, with wild eyes, responded full of hatred. "That's what you get for being a miserable excuse for a man." His words confused me. I didn't understand what he was talking about, or why he was so furious. However, in that state of anger, there was no room for reason. We continued fighting for a few more minutes until both exhausted. We ended up panting with our fists still raised, but without the strength to continue. It was then that Derek, in a tone somewhere between reproach and rage, threw the line at me that left me cold. "You're a poor excuse for a man for leaving Neftali to her fate." That's when I understood everything. He had come to my house to call me out over my ex-girlfriend. As if he still had the right to tell me how I should manage my life. I wiped the blood from my lip with my sleeve, and responded coldly. "What I do or don't do with my life is none of your business. Get out of my house right now, or I'm calling the police." He laughed with contempt, and before leaving, he played what seemed to be his trump card. "I'm leaving, but just so met Allah was cheating on you with me. Now I understand why you're a pathetic man." For a moment, I felt a stab in my gut, a mixture of rage and surprise. However, instead of letting his words crush me, something inside me prompted me to respond with a sarcastic smile. "Really? Then tell me, how does it feel to lick where I've been so many times?" His face transformed into pure fury. He launched at me again, and the fight restarted. This time, it wasn't just an exchange of blows. There was real hatred involved amidst shelves, shouts, and the thought of bodies hitting the floor. One of my neighbors, alarmed by the noise and yelling, called the police. When the patrol cars arrived, Derek had already backed off a bit. I took the opportunity to state that he had forced his way into my home, and that I was only defending myself. I don't know if the police fully believed me, but at least Derek had no way to justify why he was beating me up inside my own property. With a look full of resentment, he left the house before they could arrest him, but not without throwing another threat at me. This isn't over. From that night on, things started to get murkier. In the following days, I noticed something strange was happening with my coffee shops. Regular customers stopped coming. I received negative reviews on the internet that seemed copied from one another, and false comments began to circulate on social media. At first I thought they were coincidences, or a simple misunderstanding. But when I investigated further, I realized that everything pointed to a well-organized smear campaign. Comments like "they served me coffee with mold," "the employees are rude," and I saw cockroaches on the counter were completely fabricated reviews. I know my coffee shops. I know how they operate, the hygiene standards we work with, and how committed my staff is. No one who had actually been to my places would write something like that. Didn't take me long to connect the dots. Derek and Left Alive were behind all of this, or at least someone close to them. There was no other logical explanation. The goal was clear: to hurt me where it hurt. The most me work, fruit of years of effort and sacrifice. The pressure started to build immediately. I had to address every comment on social media, ask loyal customers to leave real reviews to counteract the fake ones, and at the same time, keep up the morale of my employees who were already worried about the situation. Tension was palpable. One of my managers even asked me if we had enemies, because it all seemed too targeted to be a coincidence. Although I have no concrete proof, I know it in my gut. This is coming from them. Derek not only attacked me physically in my home, but now he's trying to destroy what I've built with so much effort. I don't know how far they're willing to go, but what I do know is that I'm not going to sit back and do nothing. I'm considering formally reporting both Derek's assault and the digital harassment against my coffee shops. I know it won't be easy to prove, but I'm not going to let my name and my businesses be tarnished by resentful people. The most ironic part of all this is that Derek accused me of being less of a man for not continuing to support Neftela. When I think about it calmly, I realize that's what hurt them the most, that I stopped being the unconditional provider, that I refused to continue financing a life full of unnecessary luxuries and senseless whims. Maybe for them, that's being less of a man. But for me, it was simply having dignity and setting boundaries. I won't deny that this situation weighs on me. It hurts to see how someone I once considered a friend now hates me to the point of trying to ruin me. It hurts to think that Neftela, after everything I did for her, would stoop to something so vile. But I also know that every blow makes me stronger. And every obstacle reminds me why I started all of this in the first place: to have a life of my own, to not depend on anyone, and to prove to myself that I could achieve it. For now, I'm moving forward. I'm not going to give up. If they want a war, they'll have to face not just a man who is no longer willing to be manipulated, but someone who has too much to lose to stay silent. Update: a month has passed since that fight with Derek, and many things have gradually fallen into place. Although I won't deny that I'm still surprised by the way everything has unfolded. The first thing I did was focus on solving the problem of the fake reviews of my coffee shops. For weeks, 1-star reviews had accumulated on Google Maps, all with identical or very similar comments, accusing my business of being dirty, treating customers poorly, or even that the products were spoiled. The coincidence was too obvious. And upon reviewing the accounts, I realized they had all been created just days before. I presented the evidence directly to Google, and fortunately, they acted quickly. In less than 2 weeks, the fake reviews were removed, and the reputation of my coffee shops returned to normal. That relief took a huge weight off my shoulders. I knew Neftela and Derek were behind that campaign. I didn't have concrete proof to sue them. Still, as long as they weren't damaging my business anymore, that was enough. However, the most unexpected thing happened shortly after. Exactly 2 weeks after the fight with Derek, I received a message from Left Ally. It was the first time she had written to me since I kicked her out of my house. The message was confusing, full of typos, and asked me to call her. I hesitated for a moment, but I did. When she answered, I heard her broken voice. She was crying. The first thing she said was, "Ricardo, please help me. I can't handle these debts anymore." She poured her heart out for several minutes. She told me the car payments were already late. The credit cards were maxed out, and she could barely cover her basic needs. Between sobs, she asked me for some money, saying that even if we didn't get back together, could at least help her get out of the hole she was in. What surprised me most was how she tried to justify herself through tears. She said, "I'm only human, I make mistakes. Please understand." For a moment, I confess, I felt some compassion. After all, we had shared 3 years of our lives together. But as soon as I opened my mouth to respond, the anger returned. "Maybe I would have forgiven. You met Allah," I said calmly. "If I didn't know you were sleeping with Derek." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then she started crying harder, trying to defend herself. "It's all your fault, Ricardo. I went with Derek because I felt lonely. I bought all that stuff to fill a void. You were so busy with your coffee shops that I felt invisible, abandoned." That excuse was the final straw. Not only was she trying to justify her infidelity, but she was also trying to blame me for her bad decisions. I laughed. It was a bitter laugh, Kind that comes out when there's nothing left to say. How convenient, Neftella. Everything is my fault except for your lack of morals. I didn't say anything else. I hung up. That call left me with a lot to think about. I reflected on everything I had done for her, on the sacrifices, the hours of work, the money invested in her future, and how in the end, she had decided to throw it all away. It hurt. But it also taught me a lesson. No matter how much you give to someone, if that person doesn't want to grow or value what they receive, sooner or later, they will drag you down with them. Today, 1 month after everything, I am more focused than ever on my businesses. My coffee shops are still running, their reputation has recovered, and little by little, so have too. Understood that closing the door on Nestle, I was not a mistake, but probably the best decision I could have made. She chose her path, and I chose mine.